are you doing today? Today, we're going to talk about science. Now, we all know that most kids love science. Most students really enjoy science. They love learning about the world around them. They love learning about space. They like learning about photosynthesis and gravity. But did you know that in the state of Texas, science test grades are very, very low? And so that's very concerning. And so what today I like to talk about the science TEKS. And I like to demonstrate kind of how the TEKS progress throughout the grade levels as they kind of go, as we learn a lot of the same concepts. For example, kids in first grade will start learning about gravity, and yet it'll continue to get more and more complex as it gets to fifth grade. So what I like to discuss in this video are the science TEKS, to see how it all kind of culminates at the end for fifth grade here in the elementary school setting. I like to talk about how the TEKS progress over time and how they kind of get a little bit more complex. I also would like to show you some examples of student work, and kind of especially in the upper grades, so that we can see kind of what the kids learn in science and how that kind of builds a foundation for later on, for the things that they're going to learn later on. I also would like to go over maybe some possible test questions that some of the fifth graders will see, and also if we have time, we'll have a chance to go to the lab and look at some of the lab equipment that the kids get to use in the science lab. So science, who doesn't love it? And that's what this video is about. It's all science. For example, when we define science a lot of times is defined by the National Academy of Sciences. It's the use of evidence to construct testable explanations and predictions of natural phenomena, as well as the knowledge generated through the process. Another thing is that there's a lot of reoccurring themes that are pervasive in the sciences, mathematics, and technology. These ideas transcend disciplinary boundaries and include patterns, cycles, systems, models, and change and constancy. So one thing that it's very important for science students to grasp, not only in the elementary school level but also in middle school and high school, is the understanding of complex structures such as patterns, cycles, systems, and models. I know that there's many cycles that elementary school students have to master. They have to know the life cycle of a frog and of a butterfly. They have to know the rock cycle. They have to know the carbon dioxide and oxygen cycle. They have to know the water cycle. So a lot of cycles that the kids have to learn, a lot of systems that kids have to learn, and they have to kind of see how all those different components of the cycle, how they all work together really how all those components work together, and if one component or if one step is left out, how that kind of affects the entire cycle. Another thing is that the study of elementary science includes planning and safely implementing classroom and outdoor investigations. Using scientific processes, including inquiry methods, analyzing information, making informed decisions, and using tools to collect and record information, while addressing the major concepts and vocabulary in the context of physical, earth, and life sciences. Districts are encouraged to facilitate classroom and outdoor investigations for at least 50% of the instructional time. So we can't always learn science inside, right? We have to be able to take the kids outside, get them to get to know touch the dirt and touch the soil, and they can learn a lot by doing that. I know that it's also very important for elementary science school students to understand graphs, and to be able to build graphs, to be able to interpret graphs, to be able to analyze data. In grade 5, investigations are used to learn about the natural world. Students should understand that certain types of questions can be answered by investigations, and that methods, models, and conclusions built from these investigations change as new observations are made. Models of objects and events are tools for understanding the natural world and can show how systems work. They have limitations and, based on new discoveries, are constantly being modified to more closely reflect the natural world. Now, within the physical environment, students learn about the physical properties of matter, including magnetism, physical states of matter, relative density, solubility in water, and the ability to conduct or insulate electrical and heat energy. Students explore the use of light, thermal, electrical, and sound energies. And these are concepts here that I love to cover as a teacher because I know students really like it. They have to be able to understand all the different energies, from mechanical energy, thermal energy, potential energy, kinetic energy, light energy, electrical energy, and kind of how energy changes. For example, if somehow we're getting electricity into this room, we know that they're probably burning coal or fossil fuels. Now that takes heat energy. That heat energy is then converted into electrical energy, and that electrical energy, as it is kind of passes through this building, can be turned into light energy or sound energy. So children have to be able to understand, even at the 5th grade level, how heat energy can be turned into electrical energy, and then electrical energy turned into light energy or other forms of energy. So clearly, energy is very important. Kids love learning about matter, and they have to be able to understand and grasp all of these concepts. Within the natural environment, students learn how changes occur on Earth's surface and that predictable patterns occur in the sky. Students learn that the natural world consists of resources including non-renewable, renewable, and alternative energy resources. So, students have to be able to understand the difference between a non-renewable resource and renewable resources, and the importance of alternative energy such as wind energy and solar energy. And so that's other forms of energy that students have to be able to master. Now, within the living environment, students learn that structure and function of organisms can improve the survival of members of a species. Students learn to differentiate between inherited traits and learned behaviors. Students learn that life cycles occur in animals and plants, and that the carbon dioxide oxygen cycle occurs naturally to support the living environment. So we also see there that children have to understand the function of organisms. They have to understand systems such as the solar system and also ecosystems. They have to be able to understand the difference between an inherited trait and a learned behavior. And I usually like to teach it this way. For example, a squirrel. You don't have to teach a squirrel how to climb a tree. That's an inherited trait. But however, if you ever teach a squirrel some kind of a trick, then that's a learned behavior. So when I talk about inherited traits, I usually discuss that with students, and we also like to show different models and pictures on what animals can do by instinct. And when it comes to teaching them about learned behaviors, I usually like to focus on like the circus or different tricks that you might be able to teach your dog. And those are learned behaviors. Let's talk about organisms and environments. It's very easy to teach because kids really enjoy learning about this stuff. Now, what is it that a 5th grader really has to know when it comes to organisms and environments? What type of work are they expected to be able to put together and produce? And what exactly are they supposed to be able to understand? Well, the student has to know that there's relationships, systems, and cycles within environments. The student is expected to observe the way organisms live and survive in their ecosystem by interacting with living and non-living elements. So students have to be able to differentiate between living and non-living and categorize living and non-living organisms. They have to be able to describe how the flow of energy derived from the sun, used by producers to create their own food, is transferred through a food chain and a food web to consumers and decomposers. So students have to be able to understand food webs and ecosystems, but I think that a very important concept that a lot of fifth graders don't understand, or they don't really get until later on in fifth grade, is that a food chain is really just an energy chart. It's a flow of energy, because food is energy, and it's very important for kids to grasp that concept, and kind of how it all starts off. Every single food chain will start off with producers. They have to be obviously have to be around to help out the food chain. Students have to be able to predict the effects of changes in ecosystems caused by living organisms, and that includes humans, and such as the overpopulation of grazers or the building of highways. And they have to be able to identify the significance of the carbon dioxide oxygen cycle to the survival of plants and animals. And I usually love to teach it like this. When we breathe in, we take in oxygen. When we breathe out, we blow out carbon dioxide. And I like to teach the kids when we make our flow charts that when it comes to plants, they're breathing in the carbon dioxide and they're breathing out the oxygen. So it's very important for kids to understand that. Students also have to understand that the organisms undergo similar life processes and have structures that help them survive within their environment. The student is expected to compare the structure and functions of different species that help them live and survive, such as hooves on prairie animals or webbed feet in aquatic animals. So you see the different physical characteristics of an animal and kind of how they use that to either defend themselves or hide from predators or run away from predators. And students have to understand how exactly animals are able to survive and how are they able to survive within their ecosystem. Students also have to be able to differentiate between inherited traits of plants and animals, such as spines on a cactus or the shape of a beak, and learn behaviors such as animal learning tricks or a child riding a bicycle. And lastly, they have to be able to describe the differences between complete and incomplete metamorphosis of insects. So we have a lot of cycles that they have to understand here, especially with organisms and environments. Them being the carbon dioxide oxygen cycle, ecosystems, food webs, and also the life cycles of insects. So I think that the best way to do this is to show some student work and exactly what we try to teach here and how we teach these different concepts in different grade levels. Welcome back. Let's look at some student work here on the bulletin board that have to do with those same concepts that we're learning in science. If you look over here, we love making foldables here at HV Helping, and we think that it's really nice to teach it this way. So because it's fun for the kids, they get to draw, they get to write. Now here's a ciclos de vida, or life cycles, and here they're showing how when an adult lays an egg, a new life cycle begins. So there's the egg part. When it turns into a larva, it says the egg hatches, and this change is called the larva. So we see the picture there. The pupa. A pupa is a chrysalis of the larva, and the adult is what comes out of the pupa. So egg, larva, the pupa, the adult, and this is the complete metamorphosis. So it's very important for kids to understand these life cycles forwards and backwards. A lot of times when they're tested, they might leave out one of these steps, and the kids have to be able to understand what step is missing. So it's very important for them to understand these concepts. If we look at over here, we have we're identifying the different parts of a plant or of a flower and the different the functions. For example, we have the pétalos, which are the petals, the hoja, which are the leaves, the tallo, which is the stem, and the raíces, which are the roots here. So here we have more of a description on what they do. And of course this is in Spanish because this is a bilingual school, so kids have to understand they have to understand this vocabulary in both languages. It's very helpful. But by the end of 5th grade, they usually have mastered a lot of these vocabulary words in both languages. So here it just talks about the functions of the stem and how the stem, gives the plant this form and helps to carry nutrients throughout the flower. And obviously, without the roots, there would be the plant would not be able to survive. If we go over here, we have, in this case, we have the drawings on the outside and how that, that might help some kids to understand that. And over here, we have another life cycle having to do with insects. And here's another important 5th grade word. They have to know what a nymph is. And it says the nymphs are a smaller version of the adult, but they eat the same food. So they have to know that part of the life cycle of an insect. This is a concept that 5th graders must understand. As we move on over here, we have, there's obviously different ways. You can use foldables, you can use different forms of foldables. Here you just have, the different parts of the plant or the different stages. And we have this in Spanish and in English. So there's many different ways to teach the parts of a plant, and there's many different ways to teach life cycles. All right, now let's talk about knowledge and skills. Let's talk about scientific investigation and reasoning. Now, the student has to be able to conduct classroom and outdoor investigations following home and school safety procedures and environmentally appropriate and ethical practices. So this is very important for the kids to understand, especially when we're in our science lab. The kids have to understand the different lab equipment, and they also have to be able to know what to do in case there's an accident. A lot of times when it comes to safety questions on any test, the right answer is going to be tell the teacher. Obviously, in elementary school, it's important for the kids to know when it's time to tell a teacher when there is danger, especially when anything that has to do with broken glass. Students have to be able to demonstrate safe practices and use the safety equipment as described and the Texas safety standards during classroom and outdoor investigations. So a lot of times we'll start off with our very first unit in science will be lab equipment and lab equipment safety. They have to be able to label them, to name them, and also what to do in case of an emergency. Students have to be able to make informed choices in the conversation, disposal, and recycling of materials. So anytime we have lab equipment out, regardless of whatever materials we have, kids have to know what we do with the different materials whenever we're finished and how we put it up, or whether some materials may need to be thrown in the trash. Another thing is that the students has to be able to use scientific methods during laboratory and other outdoor investigations. So what I really like to do is I like to show them a few videos on experiments first before we actually do any experiments in the classroom. I like to utilize United Streaming or YouTube when we have access to that, so that the kids can see experiments. They can kind of understand the different parts of the scientific method, such as asking a question, a hypothesis, and then at the end having a conclusion. The students have to be able to ask well-defined questions. They have to be able to formulate testable hypotheses and select the use of appropriate equipment and technology. They also have to be able to collect information by detailed observation and accurate measuring. So when we take our science journals outside and we're making observations, is one of the first skills that you have to teach students is to be able to record their information in their science journals and kind of see what to do with that. They also have to be able to analyze and interpret information to construct reasonable explanations from direct, observable, and indirect, inferred evidence. They have to be able to demonstrate that repeated investigations may increase the reliability of results. So it's one thing that is very important, especially teaching fifth grade science, that I've noticed is that when we do an experiment, we don't just do it one time. We have repeated trials in order to really make sure that our hypothesis is sound. So very important concept for fifth graders is the idea of repeated trials when it comes to doing different experiments. Also have to be able to communicate valid conclusions in both written and verbal forms. Students have to be able to construct appropriate simple graphs, tables, maps, and charts using technology, including computers, to organize, examine, and evaluate information. So besides the students being able to grasp all the different concepts with the systems and the cycles, the students now have to be able to interpret that information and put it in many different graphs. So students have to be able to master and know how to build bar graphs, pie graphs, line graphs, all forms of graphs, because it's what they're going to be asked to do, it's what they're going to be tested over, and we never want any student to look at a test question or see a certain graph and say, hey, I've never seen that before. No, that's unacceptable. They have to be able to see maybe one piece of information and see how that can be put in a line graph, a bar graph, a pie graph, and so that they understand how to analyze and evaluate information. Students also have to be able to evaluate the accuracy of the information related to promotional materials for products and services, such as nutritional labels. So we know that when we do our health component and we do our science component, we can mix that. We can make it all into one thing. We can teach health and teach sciences and teach science in one thing or in one lesson. For example, when we go over nutritional labels, if it says 200 calories per one serving, and then you have a big bag of cookies and it says 4 servings per bag of cookie, you know that you have a lot of calories on your hands. So I like to teach kids those concepts using nutritional labels. Have to be able to draw and develop a model that represents how something works or looks. They cannot be seen, such as how a soda dispensing machine works. And they have to be able to connect grade level appropriate science concepts with the history of science, science careers, and contributions of scientists. And lastly, when we put everything together, obviously, the students have to know how to use a variety of tools and methods to conduct science inquiry. The students is expected to collect, record, and analyze information using tools, including calculators, microscopes, cameras, computers, hand lenses, metric rulers, Celsius thermometers, prisms, mirrors, pan balances, triple beam balances, spring scales, graduated cylinders, beakers, hot plates, meter sticks, magnets, collecting nets and notebooks, timing devices, including clocks and stopwatches, and materials to support observations of habitats of organisms such as terrariums and aquariums. You also have to understand how to use the simple things such as their safety goggles and gloves. So many different tools, many different instruments that we'll use in the science lab, and a lot of vocabulary, which we see there being a very important topic is vocabulary when it comes to science. Because if the children do not know all these different words and what they mean and how they're used, it'll be very difficult for them to do well in science. So we believe in the use of vocabulary journals in science, and I like to show those to you and just kind of see what we use to help the students understand all of these science vocabulary words. Okay, well, I like to just kind of show you a typical 5th grade notebook that I like to use in my class with the 5th graders that I was working with. We like to keep our notebook so we can keep all of our concepts here on this notebook, and also be able to kind of review. So I always have the kids make a table of contents, and then they can kind of lay out all the different components here, or the different objectives that we're going over. Obviously there's many different ways to teach vocabulary. You can see here, sometimes we'll just write out definitions, but obviously we don't want to stick to just that. We know that we can take notes on many videos. I like to use this 4-square method of just when we teach something new like kinetic energy, sometimes we'll like to have a movement that goes with it. So kinetic energy is something that's flowing and has been used, so we'll use the word here. We'll put the meaning here. We may have a picture, that's a pendulum, and then we'll use it in a sentence. Here's another example of potential energy. Sometimes we'll have the students define the words themselves, kind of after we've explained it, and whenever they use it, it's here's an example here. Doing nothing with food in your stomach, that's potential energy. So here's another example. When I'm eating at the table, I am using potential energy. Well, so you start to kind of see if the student really grasps the concept, or whether they need a little bit more help on that. Here you see wind energy. Wind energy, you have the word, you have the use of a sentence here, and the same thing here with electrical energy. So there's many different ways to teach these vocabulary concepts. Sometimes we'll make it into foldables that look like this, so that they're able to color and draw and write. When we go over circuits, 5th graders have to understand circuits and conductors and insulators. We may have them draw a circuit. We may have them draw a switch, and kind of so they can understand what a complete circuit is, and find out what they need to do for that, and also the definitions up here. Now when it comes to light energy, there's many different definitions they have to know, and sometimes we'll have to do movements, we'll have to draw them, we'll have to write about them, we'll have to use them in sentences, do everything we can so that these vocabulary words can be they're able to really master them. So we may do something like this where all these words are connected because they all have to do with light energy, and they may do this big foldable here and with all sorts of definitions and drawings, and this really helps because the difference between what is a refraction and what is a reflection can be so different. But here you can see that the student really understands the concept here, because they just kind of see a reflection. Okay, that's kind of when the light you shine in a mirror, then it reflects, so you kind of see that. And then you see when water can refract light, and you kind of see that. So you'll see a student that really understands that concept, and that helps me as a teacher know what we need to go over and what we don't need to go over. Here we have more foldables on energy and forces. Here sometimes we'll just cut out the definitions, sometimes we'll just write them, and I think it's just good to just mix it up. And here you'll have different foldables on that. So there's a lot of things that we like to do in our class. Hard concepts such as parts of the sun and the core, and you'll see many of this really interesting work. So I always like to think of it this way. If we can draw it, if we can write about it, if we can use it in a sentence, if we're able to do all of those things, then usually a kid will understand those vocabulary words, and then whenever they're tested on it, it's not difficult. They don't have to go back and think about what the definition is for that word. They can look at these different words, and it's more automatic. It's more automatic. They don't have to think, oh, what's potential energy? Oh, what's kinetic energy? It becomes more automatic when we start using them in sentences, writing them, drawing them, seeing videos, doing experiments. So just to make it a nice eclectic way of learning vocabulary, I think is the best way for the kids to understand everything they need to know in science. We meet yet again. So when it comes to science, there's definitely a lot of factors to consider. There's a lot of different concepts and systems and cycles that kids have to understand. For example, part of the things, or some of the things that the fifth graders need to learn, is that they need to know that Earth's surface is constantly changing, and it consists of useful resources. So the student is expected to explore the processes that led to the formation of sedimentary rock and fossil fuels. So I know when it comes to teaching that we pretty much get a lot of our technology from fossil fuels. For example, all the plastics that the kids' PlayStation, Xboxes, and cell phones and all those, without fossil fuels, none of that technology would be possible. That is something that gets the kids' attention, and I know one of the assignments that I have, some of my kids do, is a write an assignment is how would we be living right now if there were no such thing as fossil fuels. Obviously, a lot of the technology that kids really enjoy would not exist if it were not for fossil fuels. Another thing that kids have to understand is they have to be able to recognize how landforms such as deltas, canyons, and sand dunes are the result of changes to the Earth's surface by wind, water, and ice. So this has to do with erosion. Kids have to understand the concept of erosion, and they have to understand how erosion affects mountains and canyons and deltas and every other landform. Kids have to be able to identify alternative energy resources such as wind, solar, hydroelectric, geothermal, and biofuels. Geothermal being something that fifth graders have to be able to understand. Students have to be able to identify fossils as evidence of past living organisms and the nature of the environment at the time using models. So students start learning fossils at a very early age, from first grade all the way through fifth grade, but you see more and more complexity with what kids have to know about fossils in fifth grade. Kids have to be able to understand many of the recognizable patterns in the natural world, and especially when it comes to understanding the characteristics of the sun, the earth, and the moon. They have to be able to differentiate between weather and climate. They also have to be able to explain how the sun and the ocean interact in the water cycle. So once again, you'll see more and more complexity added to the water cycle when it comes to the different vocabulary terms that children have to know. For example, in first grade, all they may need to know is rain and the sun. But as by the time they get to fifth grade, they'll have to know evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and the many forms of precipitation. And when they draw those cycles, you'll see more and more complexity in those models. Students have to be able to demonstrate that Earth rotates on its axis once approximately every 24 hours, causing the day-night cycle and the apparent movement of the sun across the sky. They also have to be able to identify and compare the physical characteristics of the sun, earth, and moon. And so when we talk about systems, the solar system is very important. They have to know the order of the planets. A lot of times they'll have to know the order of the planets forwards and backwards. sometimes on a testing question, they may have all the planets, but there may be one missing, or they may have to be able to understand which are the closest planets to Jupiter, which are the closest planets to Saturn, things of that nature. So I think that it's very important for kids not only to understand the characteristics of the sun, moon, and the earth, but also the entire solar system and kind of how it all works together as one system. So let's look at some student work. So when we talk about the order of the planets, look at some work I had some third graders do. I had to be able to, first of all, know the position of the sun. And this is a good activity for them to understand the order of the planets. It starts from Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And of course nowadays they consider Pluto to be a dwarf planet, so not really a planet anymore. And then underneath, the kids have been able to label some or put some interesting characteristics about that specific planet to kind of help them remember about the planet. For example, when you look at Jupiter here, Jupiter is the largest planet, and it has a storm that has been going on for 300 years. It also has a great red spot, and it's made of gas. So anything that'll help students remember the planet so that it sticks out in their mind and they're able to memorize it, that is always helpful. When we move over here, I had some of my fifth graders make it's kind of like a traveling brochure, if you will. So, for example, if you were to visit Earth, once again, the kids will draw a picture, and they'll be able to list some unique characteristics about Earth, such as Earth has water, food, and air. Without Earth's air, we wouldn't be able to survive. People and animals will not survive without water, and things of that nature. When you look over here, you'll have a kind of a traveling brochure about the planet Saturn, and it has all these interesting characteristics about Saturn. For example, it has 33 moons, and it's cool, and it has rings and other interesting characteristics about that planet. Here we have a little piece of work that has to do with the planet Jupiter. And of course Jupiter is made out of gases, so that means if you go to Jupiter, you won't be able to go to bed, buy a new bed, and you won't be able to sleep all day because you'll probably be burning up on the planet Jupiter. So this is the kind of interesting activities that kids can do so that they're able to understand all the different characteristics of the planets, and whenever they learn these different characteristics, it helps them understand and know not only the planets and the order of the planets, but also the different things that make the planets unique. Let's look at some more student work. Here we have some second grade work. And here they took a big foldable and they did many different life cycles. They did the life cycle of a frog, a butterfly, an ant, a grasshopper, and a bee. So here we have an explanation, and here we end up having the kids draw out their own life cycle. And I really like what the teacher did here because they were able to write about it and also draw it. And then also do many different life cycles all at once. Here we have the drawing and the writing. Drawing and the writing for the ant. And of course, some second graders will be a lot more neat about their work than others. And when we look at the same concept here with frog, you have this child is a little bit neater, a little more detail to their work. As you see those explanations in the drawing, this is great for second grade, because if you look at this work, I mean, if you really take a look at this work, if you look at it, you'll see that it's great work for second grade, and by the time they get to fifth grade and they're ready to take that fifth grade STAR science test, they're going to be able to really understand these concepts by then and really have them mastered. And here we have a Spanish version of the same thing. El ciclo de vida de un sapo, de una mariposa, un saltamonte, una hormiga, and una oveja. Same animals, same idea. And this, of course, helps the kids be able to explain them, draw them, and then when they're faced with some of those complex test questions, sometimes one of these steps will be left out, and the kids will be able to recognize it. Here you'll see some more of the same. And you know, whether it be first grade or second grade work, you have a lot of the same similar concepts, so kids should be able to master this. And it's great to be able. It's great for them to be able to learn about these things, watching videos in the science lab, and also for them to draw them and write about them. So there's many different ways to teach this concept, many different foldables that kids can do. So it's really neat to see the work that the teachers do at our school. So as you've heard, in conclusion, students throughout the grade levels have to know many of the same concepts, many of the same cycles and systems when it comes to science. They have to be able to analyze hypotheses. They have to be able to label and name all the different lab equipment. Students also have to be able to classify matter. They have to know many of the different characteristics that have to do with matter and energy. Students also have to be able to explore many of the different characteristics that have to do with force and motion. They also have to know a lot of things about the Earth and space. For instance, the characteristics of the sun, the moon, and the Earth. They also have to know the order of the planets and some of the characteristics of the planets. They also have to be able to explain the water cycle. They have to know the carbon dioxide oxygen cycle, the rock cycle. They have to know about ecosystems. They also have to know about organisms and their environments, and how there's relationship systems and cycles within those environments. Students also have to be able to describe how the flow of energy is derived from the sun, so they have to know about food chains and food webs. Not to mention all the different concepts that they have to learn about organisms and their environments, including inherited traits and learned behaviors. So as you can see, there's a lot of information that and knowledge that students have to attain in elementary school, and a lot of the same concepts are taught in every grade. So by the end of fifth grade, they should have a lot of these things mastered, so that whenever they're ready to take the end of the year STAR test, they're ready to pass it and be successful. So I want to thank you for watching this video, and hopefully you learned a lot of what elementary science is all about. Thank you.